was a certain moment in time when something happened here that wasn't happening anyplace else. That mattered.
Asbury Park, it was like Disneyland.
Asbury Park was the honky-tonk town. To us, it was this exotic feast for the eyes and ears.
You just floated a foot off the ground all day long, lifted by this great music all the time, coming out of stores and clubs.
We took a little bit from here, a little bit from there, a little bit from soul, a little bit from pop, a little bit from the sound on the west side of the tracks, and we kind of combined it all into the sound that this town and a little part of the Jersey Shore became known for.
The Jersey sound, whether it be Southside Johnny or Bruce Springsteen or Gary U.S. Bonds, that Jersey sound is distinctively and uniquely Jersey. It's not black Jersey, it's not white Jersey, it's Jersey. It defines us as a group, not separate and apart, but it brings us together. It's soul, is what it is.
Asbury Park's music history goes way back, and a lot of it has been ignored till now, and we want to give it some recognition. And any city that wants to move forward also has to recognize its past.
Asbury Park had been the creation of James Bradley, a Methodist who made a fortune selling cannon brushes to the Union Army in the Civil War. He founded Asbury Park and named it for his faith's first bishop in the United States. He wanted to create a barrier for the Methodist enclave of Ocean Grove, found to the south of Asbury, from the excesses of the town to the north, Long Branch, whose wine, women, and gambling ways Bradley found wanton and depraved.
Over the years, as the big hotels started to come up, they had to compete with Long Branch, which had alcohol and gambling, and all the presidents went to Long Branch. And eventually, Bradley capitulated. It became a big playground on the Jersey Shore. So you would go to Ocean Grove to pray, and you'd go to Asbury to party, basically. Asbury Park was the honky-tonk town. They had pinball machines and rides and hot dogs and popcorn. And I grew up in Ocean Grove, the town next door to it. But we would cross over the little bridge. There were bands playing all the time, and drunks and women of the night. To us, it was this exotic feast for the eyes and ears. We just loved it as kids, because Ocean Grove was a wonderful place to grow up in, but it was boring. And Asbury Park was this great sea of sin.
From its very inception, Asbury Park has always been a tale of two cities, literally separated by a set of railroad tracks. Tourists from New York would pour out of the cars into the prosperous and fashionable east side of town to enjoy the luxurious hotels and spend their vacation dollars in the restaurants and nightclubs there. On the other side of the tracks lay the west side, where for over a century Italian immigrants and African Americans had made their homes and built their businesses.
The West Side was created as soon as the large hotels came here, and they needed maids, and they needed cooks, and they needed butlers and carriagemen.
Tension between the West Side and the East Side has been a part of the city since its inception, historically going back to the very, very beginning.
African Americans and the Italians, the Jews, were not really permitted east of the tracks for all intents and purposes.
Blacks were not allowed on the boardwalk. My grandfather is known for being a sand sculptor on the Asbury Park beach. He was really more than just an artist. He was actually an activist as well. People used to come from all over to admire his work, and they would throw coins down. And he did wear like a fez and some kind of robe thing. He was sneaky enough to say, hey, I'm gonna find a way to be on the boardwalk. And that way was to be dressed in the fez, so they really weren't quite sure. And even if they did know, they could use the excuse, well, we didn't know he was black.
Asbury was always a little bit of a mini city, and it carried with it all the same plagues and problems and injustices of the day.
Asbury Park was one of the last integrated beaches here at the Jersey Shore. You know, in between the casino and Ocean Grove, you have what was called Chicken Beach. That's where the blacks were allowed to go swimming during the summertime. And there's still hard feelings over that, even today.
But the reason why that particular plot of the beach was available was because it was called the Muddy Hole. Some call it the Chicken Beach. And it was because that was where the black people went, where the servants went. And it was also the place where the sewage washed up.
Asbury Park was legally segregated until probably into the late 1940s, early 1950s. And of course, after that was de facto segregation. The main thoroughfare in the west side is Springwood Avenue.
Springwood Avenue, in its heyday, was the living room for West Side residents. It was the boardwalk for the West Side of residents. It was the playground for the West Side residents. It was home.
We would go and sit in the car or maybe go get a sandwich and sit on Springwood Avenue and watch the people go up and down Springwood Avenue, dressed sharp, coming out of clubs, just fun to see. It was a show within a show.
Everybody thought of Springwood Avenue as a jazz mecca on the shore. There was so much going on in my early days. They had the Elks, they had the Turf Club, they had Big Bills, they had Madonnas, they had the Orchid Lounge. There were so many places that you could go hear some real good jazz.
All the top acts used to go in all these clubs. If you were playing in New York, you would go there. If you were going on your way to New York, you would stop in Asbury, do some gigs, and then go to New York.
My father used to take me to the Orchid Lounge. People like Kenny Burrell, Grant Green, all those kind of organ trios or guitar trios would come through there. And I was way underage, but because my father knew the owner, he would let me come in with him, and the music was amazing back then, just inspirational. To see that level of musicianship up close like that, it was stunning. Totally motivated me and inspired me.
Jack McDuff, Charles Earlin, Jay McGriff, Jimmy Smith, Pat Martino, guitar player, Grant Green, Joe Dukes, Ron Carter. Oh, God, it was all these cats. I saw it at the Orchid Lounge, you know what I mean? And it's like, and Pat Martino's white, you know, so what's the big deal, you know what I mean? It's a beautiful place. It doesn't matter what color you are there, you know what I mean? It was like everybody was there.
People drifted back and forth across the tracks. Springwood Avenue was a huge center of African-American culture, and you went over there for things, for clothes, with the fishies, for music. You went to the Orchid Lounge, where it was a black club, but you could be white and go there, and there wasn't any problems. They played a lot of jazz, but they also had soul entertainers come in.
West Side there was just great. When we were kids, we would see all the top blues guys besides the jazz guys. B.B. King, Hooker, Lightning Hopkins, all the great B3 players played at that Orchid Lounge. We'd stand outside and listen, you know.
If you were walking down the street on a Saturday night, when I got a little bit older, 12, 13, 14, there'd be all these clubs, and they'd have the doors open, and there'd be bands, and they'd be doing What I Say by Ray Charles, but they'd be using the dirty lyrics, and there'd be a saxophone player, you know. And it was exciting to us because none of that existed in our little town.
The players and the scene at that time was really kind of happening, and there was an education to be had every time you walk through a door.
Music on the west side did have a big influence on what was going on along the shore area. Part of that was because a lot of black artists would get to play the white clubs on the east side, and musicians from the east side would cross over into the west side and go into the clubs and listen to what was going on there and draw from that. No form of music exists in a vacuum. Everybody's influenced by everybody else.
The popularizing of black music that occurred in the 40s and 50s and early rock and roll, it brought African American culture into the mainstream.
You ain't nothing but a hound dog, crying all the time.
And if you look at Elvis, he crossed racial lines, and he had a lot of soul and a blackness to him. Those things had a good part to play, I believe, in the emergence of the civil rights struggle in the early 60s.
Music is the only art form that half created by blacks, half created by whites. I think it's one of the main reasons why, integration happened. You got immediate racial common ground.
It always said, if you want to see true integration, just get with musicians, man. Just there's where you see it. You see how people can unite and work together.
Motown making black records for white kids, rock and roll certainly. Will Richard invented it, and Chuck Berry was the first major artist, the most influential cat. Bo Diddley had the beat, they were gods. Gods. We grew up in the Renaissance period. It's just the greatest music ever made. It was such a big part of our culture. I mean, it was everything to our whole generation.
Since its very beginning as a Gilded Age getaway, Asbury Park has always provided a showcase for A-list talent and a spawning ground for new artists, with music being one of the only connectors reaching across the tracks between the east and west side of town. By 1968, Asbury boasted some 73 clubs, bars, and ballrooms featuring live music in a town of just 1 square mile.
Every place you went had music. I mean, it didn't make any difference if it was a hotel, corner room, a little lunch place, a bar, a restaurant. There was music everywhere.
I think it was 1964, Ray Charles initiated the Galaxy of Stars down there with Mo Septi. And so we were used to having, top-notch, world-class acts coming through Asbury Park.
I guess I was about 16. Dad drove us down to Convention Hall to see Vanilla Fudge. It's my first time at Asbury Park. Great stuff. Great stuff.
The fact that rock and roll grew out of Asbury Park was in no small measure due to Mo Septi, who brought rock and roll all summer long. All the great English groups, you name it, they played Convention Hall.
People try to put us down just because we get around.
The Who, Herman's Hermits, and Blues Magoos, that was all one show. My high school math teacher his summer job was the head of security at the Convention Hall. So Mr. Mishler, if you're out there, I would show up, and he's like 6'5" or something like that. And, the tickets were like $2 or something. I didn't have $2. And he'd just look and he'd just go in.
In 1966, I went away to summer camp, and I came back. Guys in my class had a group at the shore, and their parents somehow knew Mo Septi and got booked onto the opening slot for Herman's Hermits. Their drummer couldn't make it. They called me. Playing at Convention Hall, if you played there, I mean, to us in New Jersey, that was like playing Shea Stadium when the Beatles played there.
Your love for me just got to be real.
Rolling Stones at their peak, you could see them every summer at Convention Hall. Every major act came to Asbury Park.
Rides were going. Ripley's Believe It or Not in the casino. There were shows both in the casino and the Convention Hall. it was great from then on.
In a town jammed with venues for A-list talent and top 40 clubs, one place would be completely unique, the Upstage Club. With no liquor license, Upstage would be about one thing: music.
There were plenty of after-hours places around here, but they were for drinking. This was the first after-hours place that was devoted to music and devoted to young people.
When we were like 16, 17, there was, nowhere you could play. But we could go there and play till 5 in the morning and, play for hours at a time in front of like a packed house. Where else can you do that when you're 16, 17 years old?
There was a place that was needed for us kids because we couldn't go to the bars. And we were fortunate to have a place where we could enjoy music and dance and meet girls.
It was the beginning of something important, huh? Yeah, baby. It was the beginning of us coming into our own, coming into our own world,
It's your youth. It's your youth. It's when things were wide open and when a little bit took you a long way. Wasn't much to the place at all, except what people brought to it. And it was one of those places that there was a certain moment in time when something happened here that wasn't happening anyplace else. And that mattered.
The brainchild of Asbury Park beauticians Tom Potter and his wife Margaret, the Upstage was meant to be a club for musicians only.
I knew about its opening before it actually opened, because Tom would invite musicians. I was playing in a band, probably The Moment of Truth or Speed Limit 25, one of those, thousands of bands on the Jersey Shore. And they used to invite musicians after they finished at 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning, up to his place in Asbury to sit around and jam and play something other than the top 40 that they had been playing all night.
After I found out about the Upstage, I told Steve. And then Steve came up and he blew everybody away too, because Steve was a hell of a front man and guitar player. So then this became our hang. The two of us were here every weekend and we were inseparable.
Well, here's where we met, like most of the people that we know to this day, the freaks and misfits and outcasts all hung out here together. The genius of Tom Potter, Tom and Margaret Potter, to have like a little sanctuary for the freaks. It was one big, happy, freaky family, it really was.
When Tom initially had the idea to do this, we arrived and you just started cleaning and sweeping and painting and then he came in and started his magic of what he would do on the walls.
It was a psychedelic electric club. The walls were black and day glow painted, and you walked into it, looked like a fun house you were walking into. It was jet black walls with this fluorescent paint, and although it was a crazy kind of carnival kind of atmosphere.
I remember when Tom first floated the idea, he's like, for people to haul stuff up and down 2 flights of stairs is just not going to work out. He says, what would you think if I built amplifiers into the stage? I said, well, if you do it, there's got to be a lot of speakers. And he took me at my word. He put a lot of speakers, the whole wall.
That whole thing was a wall of guitar sound and the PA all in one, so we didn't need columns out here.
He had the front of the stage where like footlights would be on a conventional stage. There was a rack, and in this rack were the amplifiers. Bassmans, bandmasters, super reverbs.
So there was 4 outputs in each one of the Fender Bassmans. So now you had a potential of 8 guitar players could play at once.
All the amps were there, and all you had to do was take your cord, plug it into the thing, and tell them what speakers you wanted, and you were off and running.
You didn't have to bring an instrument. You just showed up and It was all done for you. So us being the lazy people we are, that sounded like just our kind of place.
The wall of sound, there it is. A kid with a cheap guitar that couldn't afford an amp to come here and play because there was amps here for him to play on. If you were a kid drummer and you wanted to learn how to play the drums and you just learned it, you could come here. There was drums here to play on. You didn't have to have a drum set. There's no place around like that. Nobody's going to set that up for anybody now. Everything's way different.
Tom was an ornery old guy, but had a vision. He had a great vision.
He was a party animal.
And Tom was this big, garrulous, goatee, very beatniky, you know, bohemian, sex on his mind, just huge, cursing, quite cheerful character.
What the hell's the matter? Oh, that's working now. Ladies and gentlemen, the Odyssey.
He saw a place for the youth of that day. Don't forget it was the 60s. He wanted a place that would encourage and nurture creativity, primarily through music.
Tom Potter, what a nut. What a great guy. But he was this great big tall bearded beer belly guy, and he was crazy. He was just absolutely, he was a hairdresser who looked like a biker.
Tom was this character, you know. He had a decoupage icebox with all these cutout nudes on it and whatever it was.
Had this operatic type monster loud voice, and he scared me at first. He had his little set of rules, and everybody had to toe the line, or he'd call on one of the bouncers and toss him down the stairs, you know, just literally drag him out.
It was always a thrill to go up the stairs, and I'd bring an acoustic guitar and sit in here and there, or Tom would say, "All right, you go up with him and you do this, and you play with this guy," and he was like the ringmaster, Tom Potter.
Sunday night, Margaret and the Third Floor will be playing. I think you will enjoy them.
Margaret's she's hard to sum up in a few words.
Margaret was initially of indeterminate sexual origin. I came up one night and there was some young kid playing the guitar, and then I noticed there was a little breast hanging over the top of the guitar, and that was Margaret and the Distractions.
Of course, Margaret was just one of those wonderful people who just, instantly loved.
She cut my hair. She cut a lot of people's hair because that was her main job, hairdressing. She had the band, the house band, the Margaret and the Distractions.
She was punk before anybody knew what punk was. Her stage presence was extraordinary. There were people that just didn't understand what she was all about because she wore unusual clothes and she had an unusual voice, and she was happening. She was lightning in a bottle.
The Upstage did not really crank up until after all the other clubs closed, when Asbury's best of the best would climb an endless flight of stairs to jam until dawn.
He had an only game in town thing here, because even though some of the bars were open till 3, that still left Tom 2 hours worth of the evening that he had all to himself.
You'd be up there, and like 3 o'clock, there'd be guys who just finished gigs on the boardwalk there, and they'd be strolling in, coming in with their axes and stuff.
The first floor was like a coffee house, like a little restaurant. The whole trip was you had to make your bones on the first floor. You had to prove you were good enough to get to the second floor.
And the place had gotten a sort of hip cachet, so that musicians, as soon as they were done with their bar gigs, hustled over here to see who was here, who was playing, to play the music they really wanted to play that they couldn't play in the bars.
You come down to Asbury, you look around for some guys to jam with. Everybody's over there at the Upstage.
It was fundamentally a jam club. People came up and you saw what everybody's chops were.
Guitar players used to come try and knock each other off here. It'd be me and Gary Talent playing the bass, and Southside singer Albie Talone would sing, or Bruce would come in and jam, Miami Steve. I think Ricky DeSarno convinced him to come in and play, you know. Rick was always here, Davey Sanchez was always here. A lot of people.
I was scared to go in there. I seen guys going in and never came out. Bruce used to go in there. Disappeared for 3 or 4 days at a time.
I came here by myself. I brought my guitar, made my way up the stairs. I played Rock Me Baby, Jeff Beck style. You know, just played it with everything I had. Doing just about everything, setting off all the fireworks I could.
Brucey was up there with little Vinnie Roslin, and me and Danny were over there by the door. Margaret was standing there, and I said, oh, geez, look at this guy. Margaret said, yeah, he's got a lot of charisma, don't he?
I think the first time I saw Bruce, you could see that he did something special to the people, you know, the reaction of the people that nobody else did.
You can tell when suddenly you've got everybody's attention. I could feel that moment happening.
You knew that this guy was headed for greatness. You know? He got up on the stage and he commanded your attention. Commanded it. Not by anything other than his charisma. He just stood there and played and sang, and you could tell that this guy was going places.
And by the time I got off stage, I'd made a lot of new friends.
Danny said, you know, I think we want to start a band with this guy. And I said, you should. This guy's, you know, he's got a gift.
When you got really good, when you were one of the best in the place, then you ran the jam upstairs. If you jammed all night, you got paid $5. If you ran the jam, and only a few of us ran the jam, Bruce, Gary Talent, Ricky DeSarno, there was only a few guys who could run the jam all night. And they got $15, so that was big money.
We would arrange the jams. You'd send 4 guys up there, but 3 of the guys, you knew that they could make music, and you would put 1 new guy with those 3 other guys, and you knew that if this guy even struggled, that was your job. Make sure that there's real music going down, not just an open jam that didn't make any sense with musicians who couldn't play.
Oh man, I saw a lot of great jamming. Billy Ryan used to drop in. I'd say Van Zandt and Springsteen and DeSarno were the 3 that I remember more than anybody. I remember Bruce liked to finish the night with a tune by 10 Years After called I'm Going Home. To end the show, I'm going home. 30 minutes later, he finally went home.
He used to come in after a gig at first, and then I started to play with Bruce. And we would come here and stay all night until 5 o'clock in the morning every night. It was fun.
You hone your craft here. You get to know each other. Get to play with different people. Get to play different styles. That's what it's all about, you know? Playing with Bruce one night and Billy Ryan another night. It's 2 different styles.
You start to learn how to perform, you learn how to interact with an audience, how to interact with other band members. That whole interaction, that energy that is what rock and roll is all about, you know?
I learned almost everything I know about performing and singing from those 3 years, 2.5 years at Upstage, because it was like our college. And I loved it. And I learned not to be afraid of being on stage.
You were just getting little snippets of history every time you turned around. The thing that you would never hear again would be on that stage, you know, or the 2 people that you would probably never see together play again, you know. It would be on that stage. And I think that people who were true musicians and true musician listeners knew it and loved it.
In the Upstage, there was a handful of black musicians who braved the East Side because they were interested in a wider, a more diverse style of music.
Gary Talent was standing there next to Bruce, and they were organizing a jam session. And he goes, do you want to play? You want to sit in? I said, yeah.
First time I saw Davey Sanchez here, he was revolutionary. He looked like a barely a teenager, he looked like, but he was electric on stage. First of all, he had enormous stage presence. He danced. He went up and down the keys. He played better than anybody you'd ever heard. And he was just, wow, where did that kid come from? He came from 10th Avenue and East Street, you know.
And at the end of the jam that we're letting out, it's like 5 o'clock in the morning now, and we're all walking home or, you know, walking to our bicycles or whatever. And Bruce and I are walking next to each other, and he goes, I'm about to start another band. I'm about to break up this band I'm in, Steel Mill. I'm gonna start up a new band, and would you like to play keyboards in it? And, you know, the rest is history, as I say.
David called me up and says, you know, Bruce is looking for another drummer, and why don't you come on down to the club and, you know, meet us and, you know, check out the band and stuff. So I went down there to the club and heard him. Bruce was playing. I was like checking him out. I said, yeah, this is rocking, man. This is pretty good. You know, this guy's rocking his ass off. And it just snowballed after that.
People drifted back and forth across the tracks, just as the ways we didn't want to be tied down to just pop music or white rock and roll. They didn't want to be tied down to just R&B or soul music, so those adventurous minds tended to cross tracks and meet here.
What's unique about the Upstage Club is it's one of the first times where African-American musicians and white musicians, they all got together to jam together. You know, that's where you can see some of the influence of the West Side probably coming into the Upstage Club. It was the first time that there was this mixture of cultures in one place for burgeoning rock and roll, you know, and that's why I say it was kind of a proving ground there.
I'm proud to be a part of both sides of that track, you know what I mean, the West Side and the East Side. That I was able to cross over and play with anybody on that side and come back home and play with anybody on this side, you know what I mean? So, yeah, definitely I'm proud to be a part of that.
My girlfriend and I answered an ad in the Asbury Park Press. Somebody was looking for 2 singers with a gospel sound. And my girlfriend called me up and said, I think this is us. And I'm like, are you sure that they really are looking for some singers or just a couple of chicks to come up to the factory, you know? She said, girl, let's get in there and just sing, you know? So we went in. My name is Bruce Springsteen. He introduced himself, you know. He put on a little Van Morrison and said the sound that he was kind of looking for this 10-piece band that he was putting together. And we just looked at each other and we said, let's sing, you know? And before the day was over, he said, your girl's got the job.
Clarence was a local figure of some renown because he played in a band called Little Melvin and the Invaders. It was an all-black band with the exception of Gary Talent. And they played in the black clubs that surrounded Asbury Park. So the night Clarence came in, needless to say, he was, you know, larger than life, got up on stage, blew that saxophone like it was a force of nature, and was a natural creature of Asbury Park and the coast, you know. There's only one, there's not going to be another one.
We didn't lead with our interracialness, you know. We led with our musicianship, really. Because, you know, Bruce was the best guitar player around. Nobody played like Clarence, you know. I was pretty good at what I was doing. Ernest Carter's amazing. Gary's fantastic. So, you know, and Danny as well. All that's where the power was in the expression itself.
Good old Melinda Shaw can make a man smile. Oh, baby, now you're driving me wild.
Because Tom Potter insisted that bands perform original material, the Upstage became a crucible for young talent, a late-night meeting place where the best musicians on the shore could connect and were encouraged to develop their own style rather than cover top 40 hits for the tourist crowd.
You wanted to do your thing, you could do it in Asbury. It was here. This is where you had to go.
You could do anything you wanted at the Upstage Club. You could play any kind of music you wanted. And we did. We took advantage of that. People were writing songs, Bruce most notably, but Stephen too. A lot of people played their own things.
It's just at that moment when that whole shift in the culture was happening from the top 40, from show business, formal show business, which is what the bar scene represented at that point, with the top 40 being required, and became more about personal expression.
For a musician, it was the best place because you could cut your teeth and you could try new ideas.
There was some cool shit happening, man, because they try anything up there.
That was one of the first places where you could begin to do original stuff. But Bruce was the one who really insisted on doing like his original stuff, And we got into trouble at some point with club owners because that's really not what they wanted, They wanted like a kind of jukebox situation. But he insisted on doing his own stuff, and he did it.
It was in the apartment and abandoned beauty parlor in this building 4.5 decades ago that New Jersey's favorite son captured the poetry and tragic beauty of this seaside town.
Well, the first record, I lived next door in the beauty salon in Tom's apartment, which was a flight upstairs. Then the beauty salon was second floor, and I wrote all the songs in the back of the beauty salon on a spinet piano that I had from my aunt. My aunt gave me. And so the songs were culled from characters both real and imagined from the streets of Asbury Park, But it was also, the carny atmosphere, the street atmosphere, the sort of punk poetry was just a part of the town and the city at that moment. So that was how I translated it. I passed the postcard stand and I went, I like this. This is me, This is where I'm from. These are the people I'm talking for. People from Asbury Park. People from New Jersey. You had Southside bringing in an enormous amount of blues. Stevie and I played, a lot of R&B and rock music of the day. And then I guess I was the first to start playing my own music. Basically, unlike Dylan or the Beatles or, like I said, who I believe were musical revolutionaries, we were more alchemists. We took a little bit from here, a little bit from there, a little bit from soul, a little bit from pop, a little bit from the sound on the west side of the tracks, and we kind of combined it all into the sound that this town and little part of the Jersey Shore became known for.
Upstage was literally like it was a Liverpool of America. Bruce Springsteen, of course, came out of there, and most of the members of his band, Southside Johnny, came out of there.
David Sanchez, when he was a young kid, came over there. Incredible musician. Probably the best musician ever came out of this area was David Sanchez.
Billy Ryan was a monster. A monster. I was in New York at the Brill Building, and there was a guy in there that had been working with Hendrix. He goes, "What in the hell was that I saw on that stage?" I said, "What?" He said, "That boy on guitar was as good as Eric Clapton and Jimi Hendrix. What the hell is he doing in Asbury Park?"
It was fun because the music was so good. There were lots and lots of great musicians coming through there. And a lot of them had had risen to the top.
I like to tell you, I was dedicated. I knew I was gonna make it, and I was relentless, and I had I was persistent. That's bullshit. Okay, I was not capable of doing anything else. And when the smoke cleared, the two freaks who really were not capable of doing anything else were left standing, which was me and Bruce Springsteen.
But the glory days for the Upstage and for the once grand Asbury Park came to a sudden and almost fatal crash on the 4th of July, 1970, when a tragic flaw in the very foundation of the town finally gave way and brought everything down with it. It promised to be a big holiday weekend. The 4th fell on a Saturday, and local vendors were hoping crowds would come to the boardwalk to beat the heat and enjoy a full bill of entertainment. Glory Road was booked to play the Upstage. Mrs. J's had acid rockers The Apple Core. Over on the west side, the Houston Persons Trio was at the Orchid Lounge. And Norman Selden and the Joyful Noise was at the Banjo Palace in Long Branch. Patton was playing down at the Paramount, Hello Dolly at the St. James, and Airport at the Mayfair. Promoter Mo Septi had 2 big shows booked at Convention Hall. 10 Years After on the 4th, followed by Jethro Tull on the 5th. And London it girl Petula Clark was set to make a guest appearance at Steinbach's department store on Cookman. And then for reasons which are still not clear, the pot just boiled over.
Black people start complaining that in these areas there was nothing for the blacks beside the bars. Some people start complaining that the meat markets was selling bad meat. East Side had everything for whites, everything.
If you don't have the jobs, if you don't have the recreation, if you don't have the single family housing in a sense, that's what we had was overcrowded. And for us, those who lived on the west side coming up, we didn't have access to all of the things.
This guy comes to Asbury Park High School and he says he's a Black Panther and he's bringing up all this violent stuff. And it wasn't the people who lived in our community, it was the people on the outside coming from other cities and places coming down to cause problems.
There was rumors that it was going to happen, and but not rumors that reached the east side. It was on the west side. There was a place called Al's House of Hits that was on Springwood Avenue, and he knew what was going on, and he would say, you know, Nikki, what, next week or so-and-so, you know, these guys are coming in.
I got the minutes from one of the meetings that I had with the mayor and chief of police, and I told them that what the young people were saying, the restlessness, there's nothing for them to do, no jobs. Our police department was not prepared for a riot.
But the city was tense, and eventually it exploded, you know.
It was the 4th of July, 1970. And I was standing right here, corner of Atkins and Springwood Avenue.
Me and Bob had gone down to open up for the late set. We were setting up our bar stools to sit down there at the door to the sidewalk. And we saw on the other side of Main Street at Banker's Furniture, sidewalks full of people. What's going on?
All of a sudden, out of the blue, the young man that was standing next to me pulled out a Molotov cocktail, lit it, and threw it at a car that was passing by. It went from just another quiet day to all hell broke loose.
And it happened so quick that all of a sudden, people are rioting in the streets, they're burning buildings, they're attacking places and people.
Heard glass break and then saw a guy throw a Molotov cocktail into the building. And I turned around to Bob and he was already halfway up the stairs. I grabbed the bar stools, locked the door behind me, and ran up and called the Asbury Park police and said something like, there's a riot going on.
The Asbury Park Press reported that trouble had started at 11 p.m. and was out of control by 4 Sunday morning. Mayor Matisse ordered a state of emergency.
We heard helicopters, I guess it was National Guard going overhead. We heard gunshots. I remember running out of there and running all the way home.
When you look out there, you saw people breaking the windows, setting fires. They were just ripping and robbing and stealing.
By that time, we were angry. We were angry. And I'm trying to rationalize it. I can't rationalize it, but I know that once you start something, you're in it. You know what I mean? Once it got started, we were in it. We did what we could. We did what we had to do.
I was living in the surfboard factory, climbed on top of the water tower, and the clouds billowed off the shore. for days.
I can remember the very first time I was out and we were playing, and we saw a big cloud of black smoke. And we were wondering, what is that? It's like the whole sky turned black. And of course, we didn't know that it was the riot, but we later did find out. We were playing, black kids and white kids playing together, and it seemed like the next day we were in different worlds.
Police Chief Tommy Smith reported the Asbury Fire Department was being stoned and attacked as they worked to fight the fires raging up and down Springwood Avenue.
We go down there with the fire engine and a truck, and we used to have a tiller man, which is in the back of the truck, and he'd steer the back, and the front guy would steer the front. And that poor bastard, whoever it was in that tiller sleep, they'd throw bottles, bricks at him, everything. I mean, it was pitiful. Yeah, how you come out alive is beyond me.
I'm sitting on my porch looking at this, and all of a sudden, after all the fires, after about an hour and a half, we're looking and said, Dad, look at that. Rats running down the street. Mice and rats and rodents just coming down, running away from the fires.
Police from 7 surrounding towns rushed to Asbury's aid as the trouble began to spread to Neptune with broken windows and a robbery at the Neptune Diner.
I remember that day very well, coming over here because everybody was concerned about the Upstage Club. I mean, all the buildings in the area were burning, especially to the 1 block west of here. The whole block was burning.
The heat from Bankers, the furniture store, you could feel it in front of the Upstage. You could feel it. I was on the roof of the Upstage. You could feel it.
My grandfather was on the roof with a shotgun and watching all of the chaos take place below.
The weirdest thing, he had a friend of his from Philadelphia who just happened to be in town who played Scottish bagpipes. And he went up on the roof and played the bagpipes. Well, we could hear gunshots and flames going up.
And I remember guys that, I used to think were, very nice, sweet guys, getting rifles and standing on the roof, like it was hunting season, It got weird for a minute there.
I was sitting on the stairs by the front door, and some dude opened the door with a lit Molotov. And I pointed my shotgun at his head and I said, "Just go away." And he did.
By Tuesday, the commuter train from New York was skipping the Asbury station. Jersey Central Power and Light had cut off power to a 6-block area around Springwood Avenue, and the protesters presented a list of 22 demands to Mayor Matisse, including the removal of City Magistrate Eugene Capobianco.
There are multiple things that could have caused it. When you live in a city like this where it's 40% black, there's not enough employment for our youth. There are so many social ills that would have to be corrected.
And then 100 New Jersey State Troopers joined the fray and shut it all down.
Troopers, making sure that you did not get across Main Street.
Right here at Memorial Drive and Springwood Avenue, seemed like the whole community was lined up. And they had bricks and bottles and stuff. And as we were running, they were throwing over our heads at the oncoming police officers.
Everybody was there who had a gun to protect Asbury Park from the riots going on from the west side to the east side.
The Asbury police at the time were pretty aggressive, for this area.
As we were running along Springwood Avenue, the police were shooting. They were shooting, and we thought that they were shooting pellets. But a young man that was running with me got shot. He got hit in the leg with the .38, and it went through his leg, hit an artery. I borrowed a woman's petticoat. She ripped her slip, and I made a tourniquet out of that, and I actually saved his life.
It truly was ugly. I can remember the state troopers, 2 in the front, 2 in the back, and they got this guy squashed in the middle. Pulled him over, the guy took his keys, opened up the trunk, loaded with gasoline, Molotov cocktails, everything else. Like, These troopers just annihilated these guys, just pulverized them.
You're hearing about people being accosted by the state police and put in the trunks of cars, and you're scared. Everybody's scared. You don't want to go out. You don't want to walk the streets. You can smell fire, smoke everywhere. That was a very dark time.
When the smoke cleared, 8 big buildings had been completely destroyed by fire. 75% of the businesses on Springwood Avenue were damaged and closed, never to reopen.
All of the citizens of Asbury Park have been irreparably damaged. I observed that the burnings were indiscriminate. Many black businesses were burned as well as white. It took no great judgment for me to conclude that this is a disaster area.
Whatever happens now, Asbury Park will never again be the same. In this small but tragically typical ghetto, the rioting has meant a venting of long, simmering anger, a desperate expression of frustration. The people of Asbury Park's west side don't feel much like talking now. They too are shocked and worried about the chances for a really better tomorrow. Jeff Kamen, NBC News.
Some of the people lived on Springwood Avenue above the stores, and it was like slumlord, They just got tired of it. They said, well, if you tear it down, they gotta build us something new. They gotta build it up. They wouldn't have any idea that it was gonna be like this now, what it is now.
They were living in terrible conditions. So they burned it down. And it was, really mind-boggling that it happened in our little corner of the world. We had seen it in Detroit, and Newark and like that, but in Asbury Park, it just seemed so strange, but it was understandable.
It was just a phenomenon. It was sort of a tired of being sick and tired kind of thing. And they exhibited it, their anger and their frustration in a violent way.
When it happened in Asbury, it didn't surprise me. Growing up in the late 60s, I remember the marches, and I remember graphic images of water hoses down in Alabama when Martin Luther King was killed, and Bobby Kennedy. And I remember the rise of the Black Panther Party and when they shot the kids at Kent State. I remember seeing that on television. I said, what are they doing? What are they doing to these people?
It was a sad moment in the city's history, but it probably needed to happen. It needed to happen.
And the town of Asbury Park was started on a steep and destructive spiral, which would bring it over the course of the next several decades to a state of complete urban blight.
When the riots happened, everything closed up. Took the wind out of everybody's sails.
Many of us that grew up in this town went to either the boys' club or any number of places where we didn't know race issues at that time. And it was a rude awakening in many cases, because for a lot of those people, they were living those issues every day of their life.
Not everybody on the west side participated in the riots, but it seemed that everybody had to pay for the problems that existed. They weren't involved, but they found it hard to find jobs. They were considered to be troublemakers. Even though they might have tried to help out even after the riots, they were looked upon as being violent individuals and individuals that couldn't be trusted.
I don't know if they were being punished, just the money factor was not there. The investors decided not to invest in that particular area, and it made the people very, very disheartened. They just felt that we were being ostracized, and really the West Side was just there. The riots really turned Springwood Avenue and the West Side upside down. We lost all of the stores and the atmosphere and the ability to really enjoy ourselves on the West Side. I guess a lost art as far as the music scene was concerned.
And I think that has a long-term impact. In fact, individuals who grew up in that era, they don't even have the memories of what it used to be. That is their life. That's all they know is the void and of the west side of Asbury Park.
Asbury Park went through what a lot of cities went through during that time period. Taking the educational system down and the property values down was probably the main thing that started Asbury into its downward spiral. Did the riots play a factor? Yes, they did. Did they ruin Springwood Avenue? Yes, they did. Could the city have recovered from it? Yes, it could have.
What really kept Asbury Park down was the greed, it was the corruption, it was the disrespect. There were really some basic politics played in Asbury Park of corruption and control. You had all sorts of shenanigans going on. Family members for generations being hired, not because of qualifications or because of what they could bring to the city, but just because of those connections. So it really was the old-fashioned good old boy network.
In the early 80s, the city concocted a scheme. They're going to sell the entire beachfront.
Asbury Park used to have the most grand theaters at the Jersey Shore. The Mayfair was torn down over, a tax dispute between the city and the owner?
The guy that was going to buy it had no construction experience, no development experience. He was a, quote, financial planner.
And then you had the revenue from the parking meters evaporate in between collection and the bank account.
Make a long story short, they were going to sell him every building from the power plant, the casino, to all the pavilions, the conventional, every building on the beachfront. $1 million.
People dismantled this town and put it in their pockets at the expense of other people.
Despite the hurdles, there were occasional sparks of life along the boardwalk. In the 80s, local builder Henry Vaccaro led an attempt to revitalize the waterfront.
I'm the guy that started the redevelopment, and we brought Danny DeVito to Asbury. He had the world premiere of his movie, Throw Mama from the Train, in the Berkeley Carteret Hotel, and then he had the premiere across the street at the Paramount. I mean, it was good times.
But a lost summer season due to a sewage spill and the SNL crisis bankrupted Vaccaro and his partners.
We had the period of time between the 80s and 90s, which is 10, 20 years even after the riots, where it's very barren, it's void. There's nothing to reach for. There's a void of music. There's a void of purpose. This spirit is broken.
Asbury continued its long death spiral until only one light remained lit on the Asbury shore, the famed stone pony.
We were pretty much at that point the only business that was operational on the ocean front. But for the most part, people weren't coming to Asbury Park for any other reason other than to listen to music.
We got the gig at the Stone Pony, and that's where we started out. Stephen was working with the Dovells, an oldies act at the time, plus he was also working on the New Jersey Turnpike. This is a guitar player, a magnificent guitar player, songwriter, arranger, brilliant musician, and he's out there with his jackhammer, and his hands would be like this, and he'd be covered in asphalt. And I'm like, Stephen, you can't do that, you know? And so eventually he joined the band that I had, and we renamed it the Jukes, and he kind of took over direction.
We changed the sound of a bar band. We added horns, and now almost any bar band has to have horns.
The sound was good. You know, they would give us free drinks, which was key for me.
I think we started on whatever the worst night was, you know, Monday night or something, you know.
And we built up a following, and then they gave us Sunday night. So we had Tuesday, Thursday, and Sunday, the 3 worst nights of the week to play. And we built up quite an audience.
It was like, you know, 50 people, and then 100, and 200. And then they fixed the roof. maybe we won't close.
We had a vast repertoire of songs. People would come and jam. Boz Scaggs came one night. Jim Messina, Bruce would come down and jam.
We had a little notoriety. He got a little publicity, and so who's hanging out with us, you know, brought a little bit more attention. And so all of a sudden, we created a scene.
And then they started to have other acts come in. You know, the Ramones would come in, say, or some band that had a following somewhere else.
Rolling Stone magazine used to have the last page used to be a live review. Miles Davis at the Fillmore, or the Grateful Dead over here, or that. And for us, they did, Wednesdays, Fridays, and Sundays at the Stone Boney, the Jukes,
It's the same everywhere. I mean, it's why local bands remain important, because huge part of the thing that threads people together. You get a night of that, the next day, back at your job, out on the street, it doesn't seem quite as bad. These things make a difference. Everybody's broken, so we are the fixer of broken things.
And that residency, was pretty historic looking back on it now.
And it became more of an international place, but at the beginning it was just another knockdown bar in Asbury Park. And it just grew from that.
Biggest difficulties we had here was a perceived notion that Asbury Park was very scary place. It was violent. It's a place you didn't want to come. So we did a lot of events to get people back into the city.
As the mayor of Asbury Park, I'm going to declare Asbury Park to be the music capital of the Jersey Shore.
You could feel it. Things were starting to happen again. Most of the clubs were only open on Saturday night, then they were doing Friday night, and then Thursday night, and then Sunday, and it just sort of came together. But as it came together, the people started coming back. You could feel it. You could feel that the music was back, and it just as it always carried the city before, it just happened again.
Right now, the awesome power of music is behind me. In the body of Joe Brzezinski and the House Rockers.
Light of Day opened up slowly over the last 18 years. One of the initial things and important things that I think it did was it was another thing that told people that there was life in Asbury Park, that people would come here.
A lot of us, really our music experience is basically centered on Asbury Park, and we kind of migrated here. We were drawn here by it in a way. So we felt we had to give something back. Now we're probably bringing in 10,000, 12,000 people because we have a downtown component of it.
Asbury Park is very important to us because of the history and because of the mythology surrounding it.
At the other end of the boardwalk, Shep Pettibone opened the Paradise nightclub, followed by the Empress Hotel. Destinations designed to cater to the LGBTQ community.
Straight people come into Paradise and they're like, wow, how did I never know this was here? But that's definitely the first thing they think of. Maybe not the first. The first probably is, just so you know I'm not gay. Second thing is, wow, this place is wonderful. We are open for everyone. Everyone is welcome. That's always been part of Shep's motto. I watched him give a speech that he had a vision to bring people together, especially on a dance floor where they can feel home and free and not afraid. That definitely is what he created when he bought and opened Paradise.
And it was an amazing thing in the first couple of years of being here to have that type of establishment open and be a draw. And it became a draw in and of itself. Like, even though nothing else was ready for the people to come, the people came.
Everything else was just floundering a bit. That Empress Hotel found a way to move forward. And that Paradise, the Paradise Club, was the happening place. And yes, it was a gay club, but I had fun going there myself.
The good thing about Asbury, like I said, was a little bit of the city. So the rules were a little more wide open. It was a gay bar. The people came across the tracks either way a little bit. It was just a little more urban and slightly more sophisticated. It was dangerous still. I mean, it wasn't easy for any of those folks, but it was, there were places there for you to go. That was made Asbury very, very very unique.
Asbury Park, New Jersey, if you're feeling good, make some noise.
I've said it 1,000 times. The gay community played a huge part in saving this town. Great things are happening. And when the gay community decided they would set up shop to some extent in downtown and Cookman and all the rest of it and have all these galleries and great restaurants, it was a great thing.
And then they took it to the next level because they've started to invest in Asbury Park. And not just businesses, actually a lot of them are business owners and actually residents.
It got so low, that it was like an open space. It was an open city. The gay population come down and began to be real creative in town and bring the town back. I had some musicians, some artists come in, and it was a place where suddenly there was room to create. The fact that that was the foundation of the new Asbury Park and that it's been able to hold on to that part of its identity while being developed is a great thing.
I think pretty much in Asbury, being gay is tolerated everywhere. The gay people came to this town, renovated the beautiful Victorian houses, and put their flag up. One of the first things they did.
Am I proud of that flag behind me? I think it's an important visual. It's one of the things that, to people who come to visit, who might be gay, they get an immediate sense of community, an immediate sense of welcoming. So I'm proud of it for the message that it has, especially in light of some of the things that have happened in the world. I want to make sure that I have a symbol that welcomes anybody that wants to come to my town. The two flags always fly together because you can't be this without that.
There's been a rehabilitation, if you will, of the East Side. Simultaneously, there should have been the same thing going on the West Side, but absolutely nothing has really happened or changed on the West Side. There's no real measurement, if you will, of anything like what's been already taking place on the East Side.
West Side is still in dire need of development and share in some of the prosperity that come to the city. You forget when Springwood Avenue burned, a tremendous loss of African-American culture in the city, and that's never quite come back the way it was at one time. That'd be nice to see at some point.
Music moves, and music unifies. And music is the soul of Asbury Park.
In a watershed moment, music returned to the west side of Asbury Park.
Tonight, the Asbury Park Music Foundation has the honor of bringing you all one of the most historical concerts in over 40 years.
For the first time since the death of legendary Springwood Avenue, a concert series was held in a new park where the great Cubas once stood. The first public music on the west side in more than 4 decades.
We had 5 concerts out of the park, jam-packed. Not only the people from the west side, but even more maybe came from elsewhere.
And although the death of Springwood Avenue has silenced the world-renowned jazz and blues of the west side, the power of music lives on in the community.
Music is powerful because it is therapeutic. I know secular music has a way of moving people, but there's nothing like the spirituals. It is something that kept our people, even during a very difficult time in this country, as African Americans, and it is something that holds us and keeps us even now. This was a place where Ella Fitzgerald sang, and B.B. King, and Duke Ellington, the biggest, the greatest. Can we bring that spirit back? Well, then you'd have to bring
those kinds of people back. You'd have to have more Bruce Springsteens walking the streets of Asbury Park and shaking hands with people and saying to those on the east side, hey, why don't you bring some of these people over here from the west side and show them what we got and see what they got, because they have something to offer.
You have to proceed as if problems can be resolved and as if, hey, the sun's gonna rise in the morning and those better days are waiting, so.
Let me tell you something. That same artistic blood that ran in the veins of the forerunners are in the grandchildren and the great-grandchildren. There's some very, very talented people here, still, with just waiting for an opportunity to express their greatness.
In the shadow of the legendary Upstage stands the future of music in Asbury Park, the shiny new Lake House Studios.
You good? Mm-hmm. All right, we're ready. We're ready.
The kids are experts in one thing only, what they like, you know? And what do they like? They like music.
Power of music is alive at Lake House. The intention of Lake House was to create a place to nurture young musicians to go out into the world and sing their song.
What does it mean to go to Lake House?
It's really cool there, actually. Like, they're really cool people there, like this person right here.
Lake House is so important that what John has done there is picked up the slack where our government has let us all down, because when I was a kid, there were a lot of art programs, there were a lot of music programs, things that exposed you to areas that you might not otherwise be exposed to.
For me, from as early as I can remember, it was really about music. The music changed my state, literally changed my state. It made life better, and I was all in.
Music saved my life. I mean, you know, I don't know what I would do without it. You know, I was raised in New York City, actually in Queens, New York. Not a great neighborhood, not a lot of ambition, you know, just drugs and gangs. If it wasn't for music, I wouldn't have any direction.
You're connecting to this. I want you to connect to the audience.
I see kids all the time come walking through our doors. They're broken. They're, you know, not holding their heads up. I guess out of place at their school. And they come to us at Lake House and they find their niche, they find their family, they find their home, they find their artistry, creativity. All that, man, just really turns a person around, you know, gives them direction and a path to walk on.
We're gonna do something called a rock and roll ending. Do you know what that is? Yes. What's a rock and roll ending? Go ahead, Oliver.
Power music at Lake House is also kids from different neighborhoods, people of different religions, you know, different nationalities, social, economic upbringings coming together. They're all here and they play in bands together, and the only thing they see is that you're playing a C chord, I'm gonna play a C chord, and that's how we align.
Here we go. 1, 2, 3.
Some of the brightest lights in Asbury Park are a group of 10 and 11-year-olds called the Lake House Junior Pros, who've played more than 50 professional shows since being formed in 2015.
Jeremy's a star. Jeremy, and when I say a star, he has light in him. He's humble. He knows that, you know, he can do some damage on the drums, but he never acts that way. He comes in and he's ready to learn.
I don't really care, like, who people like, what, like, gay, lesbian, bi, what skin color they are, their religion, really. All that matters is practicing and making a good career out of music.
everybody can relate to like a certain band. And like me and Jeremy, we both love Blink-182. And like we don't care that people say that band's bad, and that's how like we bond, because we both like it, so it like brings us together.
Zakaya walked, and I always tell this story, she walked through our doors. She was 9, I think, not even 8, not even 4 foot tall. I asked her, I said, what do you want to play? And she thought for a second, and she pointed at the bass. And I said, the bass? Because nobody ever says the bass. They want to play drums, they want to sing lead, you know, or rock out on the guitar. She wanted the bass. I put it on her, it was huge. And she's been nonstop since.
At first I was like, oh my gosh, what am I doing? Oh my gosh, I'm not going to be on stage. Oh my gosh, what am I doing? And now I just started, okay, hi. And I just keep playing.
And the junior pros were invited to record an original song with some of the veterans of the Upstage Club.
Uh-oh, trouble's here.
The city, though we knew there was work to be done. On the boardwalk, those girls looked so damn pretty. On the circuit, those machines came around.
And the junior pros were invited to play that original song at the Prudential Center in Newark to a sold-out audience of 16,000. But the biggest dream comes true moment for the junior pros came just a week later, when they were invited to play a sold-out Paramount Theater in Asbury Park. On the bill with the Upstage veterans, Southside Johnny and the Asbury Jukes, Little Steven and the Disciples of Soul, and one very special surprise guest.
She finally got the letter she was dreaming of. Johnny wrote and told her he had fell in love. As soon as he was married, he would bring her back and build a big mansion by the railroad track. So every time they heard the motor roll, they would stand and wait on him to kitchen door.
I think Asbury Park is a microcosm of the world because there's so much here, and there's this polarized Asbury Park with an east side and a west side. And I think in anything in life, having those two poles, putting them together is when the electricity and the opportunity happens.
Music does bring people together. It is a bond that stood us in good stead when we were musicians, teenagers.
So it's that universal heartbeat, right? That universal dance of life, you know, that we all have in common.
It was just a way of being part of something bigger than you are. I think people need that when things are bad.
When I woke up this morning, Lucy was not inside. In a regular battle, but only
Your job is to provide proof of life to people that they're simply not alone. You know? That there is an us that is real and that gets called up when the band leader counts off 1, 2, 3, 4. There is a community that's brought forth. There's a commonality that gets pulled out of people that means something. Has a direct result on their lives and their life when they take it out of the building.
The East Side and the West Side can learn something from the musicians in Asbury Park, that we're able to come together and work in harmony. Once we just not think about color and those things that separate us, well, let's think about some things that bring us together, the things that cause joy and happiness in our lives. And if we can sing together, we could definitely work together.
They always say it's darkest right before dawn. So we've been through the darkest hour. We're not where we need to be, but you know, we're definitely headed in that direction. Asbury is never going back. The only thing we're going to be is the new Asbury Park.
Anybody want to go home? I was hoping you'd say that. Come on, baby. All right. Everybody clap your time is getting late, but I don't wanna go home. I'm in a hurry, baby, time can wait, 'cause I wanna go home. Listen to the man sing his song baby, I don't mind if we stay all night long. I don't
the end of Upstage. Time for something new.